Hello, good morning, welcome back. How's the beard look? Pretty good, right? All right. Part 3. All right, we're gonna go and do some more of this here. JavaScript calculator. The JavaScript for this is very easy. We only have count. Look at my notes: 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 functions. Small functions. That's it. We don't even have to enable jQuery for this. We're just gonna use vanilla JavaScript. Although I did change my mind a little bit. I see my mic's kind of loud. Sorry. Let's see if that helps. Not much, huh? All right. I did change my mind a little bit about adding some dependencies. All right. So what I did is I went and enabled Bootstrap, and I was playing with Font Awesome as well. Just show you how we can add that stuff in and how to add in jQuery. So what I've done is I've added in that stuff directly into our CodePen project here. But when you do enable Bootstrap, your sizes and stuff change because Bootstrap's going to handle that a little differently because it is meant for a responsive design. So even though you're using straight using buttons with HTML and CSS, Bootstrap is going to be managing that. So how it's going to look, all right? So it's going to manage your CSS, which are calling onto your HTML. So you have to play with that a little bit. When you enable Bootstrap, you're going to notice everything is going to kind of shift around on you. But the reason is because after this video, I'm going to show you how to go and put everything into GitHub using a virtual machine and a virtual machine using an IDE, Cloud9, which freeCodeCamp recommends using because it's free. And I'll show you how to log in, do that, GitHub, push, pull, initiate projects, and save it forever using GitHub. All right, and that's sort of the next step when sort of the beginning the back end. So I want to do that now with the last few projects here. And actually the last reason is because the last few projects actually I built directly in the IDE, because you'll see it's a little bit better when you start typing through stuff and just makes your life a little easier. However, you don't get the live updates like you do on CodePen itself. So all of that being said, those are why I made the changes. I'm going to go back and show you the changes I made, and then we're going to do the JavaScript, which goes very, very quickly. And then I'll make a new video introducing you to GitHub and all that kind of stuff that you're all pretty familiar with because you had to go make those accounts anyway. All right, let's get right down to it. So here we go. Here's my calculator. All right, I didn't really change much here. What I did do is I shortened this to calc because in my settings, here we go, I enabled jQuery even though we're not using it, just so I can show you how to put it in. And that way I actually get this address here, which is what I want because you might need this in the future for other projects. And I also added in Font Awesome, all right, the Bootstrap CDN. This will tie you directly into Font Awesome, and Bootstrap 3.3.7, which is the one that currently works at the time of filming this anyway. All right, and these are some of the main dependencies that we use in most of our projects. So I decided, you know what, let's enable them so that way if you want to bring some of your other projects into GitHub, you can, and you can figure out how to add in those dependencies as well. Okay, remember, all those are it just links to bunches of code, right? So when you load your page, a whole bunch of other code gets loaded down in there too, or gets accessed, I should say, so that way you can run all of your scripts and your CSS references that stuff. So it actually adds in a little bit of a middleman, I should say. So anyway, after you do this, you're going to have to readjust some of your sizes in your CSS. But a cool benefit is now when you roll over a button, you see it. You see that? We get a little finger pointer there. Ta-da! Makes it, I just like that too. So adjust your sizes. A lot of the things, the keys I pretty much left the same. What we really had to adjust is a little bit with the equal sign here and the display itself, and a little bit in the calculator. I just set it at 250 by 350. Okay. So that's that. I'm going to leave open some of the HTML, all right, here, because the HTML, notice that, actually, let me open it up all the way. Remember, we have this on-click, all right? So we're not going to initialize the on-click in the JavaScript, all right, like we have been doing in other projects with jQuery. We did it right here using our form. And it says on-click, run this function with the input C, All right. So that means it's looking for a function that's called add to screen. All right, or add screen or whatever we called it last time. All right, and we're looking for the input of C. All right, so there we go. And we don't have that yet. Same thing with backspace. It's looking for a function named backspace. It's looking for a function named power. It's looking for add to screen. And notice the add to screen is looking for a string input as a parameter. All right. So that means we have to set that up, that add to screen function, with a certain parameter of something, of a string or of an element or something. Okay. So how do we get all this stuff started, and how do we get whatever we want? So we know how to pass stuff into a function from one side to the next here, from our HTML to our JavaScript. But how do we get that to show up on our display? Okay, on our display in JavaScript. So luckily, all right, I'm going to create a variable, and I'm just going to call it box. And I'm just going to set this to document dot get element by ID. Get element by ID, and it says, well, what element do you want to get by what ID? And this is called display. Right. So now I have a variable called box that's going to access the display, and it's going to put whatever's inside of this element into display. Right now there's nothing there, so the variable will have nothing there. So we also want to put something here. Okay. So also that means that if we have one of our variables, we set it equal to box. So what happens if we say box equals, well, 5, right? So when you set something equal to it, all right, what's going to happen is what we can do is that it's going to push some values to and from our screen. Okay, so how do we actually make this work inside of a function to put something into that box value? Okay, so what do we have to do? We have to add this add to screen function. Okay, so how are we doing this? Right, so we know that we're taking the values from this element ID here. All right, so let's go ahead and start with, let's create a function that we need this add to screen function. So we define a function like normal. Notice we're not using jQuery, we're not using the $ or anything. We're not using any shortcuts. To screen. And remember, whatever you named your on-click here, whatever your on-click function is for all your buttons, is what this function needs to be named as well, okay? So if you name this differently from this, I think in my other videos I needed something shorter. I don't remember. It's been a little bit since I've done those, so I don't remember exactly what they were called. All right, so add to screen. And add to screen, I want to bring in one parameter. All right, notice I'm passing in a parameter that is the button itself, and I've already have that set up. So I'm going to pass in one parameter. All right, and all I got to do is say box.value. All right, so the value of the box, all right, which is what's going to be this in here. So you know when I just said the box itself, the element, and I set that equal to 5 and nothing happened, right? So now look what happens when I say I don't want to change the actual box itself, but I want the value of that box. And if I set that equal to X, okay, what happens there? Let me save. So what happens if the value, oh, look, the value is going to change. Why? Because the value of this this 9 here has a value, all right, that I click on. But the value over here, what we're talking about, is just what shows up inside of this button, right? So 9, what we're talking about is this value being this number 9. But what we're doing is passing in the string 9 into add to string. Okay, so don't get that confused. The value here is just going to be the number on click screen, all right? We're going to be passing, we're looking for the parameter X, okay? We're going to pass in the argument 9 into that parameter X. So X now, that parameter X is the argument 9 when I click this 9 button. Sorry. So there you go. So that's pretty cool, right? So, oh look, but now C still says C. That's not good. That's not good. C is supposed to clear, right? C is supposed to clear. So how do I not get a C and get clear? Well, if it sees a C, if the argument is C for the parameter X, right? So if X is equal to C, why C? Because C is supposed to be our clear. Where's our clear? There you go. C, right? C. So if X is exactly equal to C, all I have to do is box dot value equals an empty string, right? And that's it. So it changes, right? So the box is now changing based on whatever I click on. And when I hit C, it should clear it. Let's see. Oh, it would help if I have box.value. It clears it to an empty string. Pretty cool, right? So now I have functionality where the buttons go to the screen, but every time I do it, it doesn't add anything to it, it just overwrites it. So what I can do is instead of equals, I can say plus equals. Ooh, look at that. Now I can click and add things to my calculator. Pretty simple, right? And then I can clear. See how simple that was? It's really neat, right? I've seen some other solutions where we were trying to populate arrays and do all of this, but guess what? The forms do it for us. Just do it in a form. You don't have to mess with any of this stuff. And then look, they're separate functions. I don't even have to do it with jQuery and have our loop going in jQuery, anything like that. Nope. Vanilla JavaScript. That's it. So now most of our stuff works. Check that out. Buttons, add, clear. We're well on our way. Well, one other thing which is really cool, which gets us most of the way through this, and give us some room to kind of break that out. Okay, here we go. So that's our add to screen function. Well, what happens when we want to evaluate our function when we hit this equals? So what is this equals? Remember our equals, we have an ID of equal, and on click here we get answer and run a function with no parameters being passed in. Okay, or no arguments being passed in, so I'm not looking for any specific parameters into this function here. So I know I have to run a function, and that function has to look like that, right, with no parameters, and it's going to be called answer. This says answer. Okay, and all I want to do is I want to evaluate. So what happens if I hit 85 plus 78? Oh, look, it actually looks like a calculator. But I want to evaluate this. All right. So what's cool is I can just set now equal to box dot value. Okay. And then all I have to do is now take my x and eval. It's a built-in little function here. Evaluate will evaluate the a string, okay, as math. So basically, if you look at, let me all right, and so now that x is going to be evaluated, and then all I have to do is put in box dot value now. So I took the box value, I stored it in x, which is that string. I then evaluated that string and reset that to that x. So I overwrote that x with the evaluated string, all right, which is do the math. That's all it's saying is do the math. All right, so now there's still nothing in that box. That's not going to help us. So I want to overwrite that box dot value, all right, to the x. That's it. So now, make sure this saves. Now, if I do 55 plus 77, now use the JavaScript evaluate. Oh, look, we get the answer. How about 44 times 5 minus 2? Evaluates it. Awesome. 100 divided by 1 equals, oh, look, we get an answer. And I can clear it out. Look at that. That tiny little function does all of that. Why? Because we have this eval. Okay? And it's really simple, just evaluating the math. If you want to Google JavaScript eval, to put those backwards, right? And you can take, look at this, eval, a string. All right, evaluates JavaScript code represented as a string. All right, look at this, and here you go. And this is all of your documentation for eval. Okay, and you can always take a look at that later, but it's pretty simple because we're doing a calculator, which is actually pretty much defines what this is. And it's going to do it. It's going to use order of operations. So we're going to get the correct value every time. All right. Next, what's next on here? Let's go ahead and I have this next function. Let's do the power function because this one's pretty easy. So I want to be able to square something by clicking this button, just by keep clicking and squaring this. All right. And you might not always want this to square. Maybe you want it to the fourth power or something like that. It doesn't really matter what this button does. You can have this button do any mathematical function. Okay. I think I called it power. All right. Power, whatever you want to call this button, you can. So I'm just going to write another function. Power. Power. All right. And power, if you want, you can pass power. You can have a parameter. You can have it look for an X or a Y or something. You can set this to just like I'm doing it and the very simple way. And when you do it a much simpler way with power, all you got to do is set that same variable X equal to box.value again. All right. And then set X equal to evaluate X times X. All right. And that's all I'm doing is multiplying those together and then setting that box dot value equal to X again. And that's it. So I can save 8 plus 5 minus 4 equals squared. Oops. Box dot value, that would help. 8 squared. All right. And if you wanted a square root, you could do a square root function as well. So you could take a look at all the different math functions that they have. Do they have them listed here? No. You could do a square root function. So you can just do a simple search here for square root. I think it's square root. Yep, math.square root. So if you wanted to add a square root button in here instead, all right, you would just have to have a function math.square root, and then you could just write math.square root, all right, instead of evaluate that, okay? And then so you can add as many buttons as you want to your calculator, do all kinds of stuff using all of these math functions built right into JavaScript. Pretty cool. I just wanted to show you that one. Just a quick way to do this. If you wanted like x to the third, guess what? X times x times x. All right. Or you can use the power function. There's also a built-in power function in math. It's math.power. It's either math.power, math.power. I forget offhand. That will work as well. So basically, all of our buttons work, except for one thing. This CE, or clear entry, which is nothing more than a backspace. So I think I called it even backspace over here to remind me to make sure that I have a function called backspace. So function backspace, and I'm not going to pass it anything. All I'm going to do is I need to figure out what's on the screen. Okay, so now this is going to be a little more tricky. So on the string, this is going to be represented as a string, and then a string is accessed in a zero-base index, so 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, right? Actually, it's the other way around, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So, so there's 6 numbers on the screen right now. Okay, so I'm going to set a few variables here. So I'm going to set a new variable. I'm going to call this num, and I'm going to set this equal to box.value. And I could use that x, or I could use y. It doesn't really matter what that variable is. I'm going to have a new var. I'm going to call this len for length. And I'm going to set length equal to num dot length minus 1. So what I've gone ahead and done is I've stored the entire string in a new variable. Then I took the length property of that string minus 1. All right, so now instead of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 8's here, I'm just saying, well, I stored I figured out that there was 6 things here, and now I have a new variable called len, which is the number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 minus 1. So it's only looking at 5. All right, so no matter what the string is, it'll always give me 1 less. Why do I want to do that? Well, because I want a new number. I want a new number. Not ver, var. One of these years I'll learn how to type properly. New number, and all that new number is going to do is I'm going to set num.substring. Substring. And we've used substring a bunch of times before, and substring is just going to take 2 things in, where I want to start my substring and where I want to end my substring. And that's it. All right, and then I can set the box.value equal to my new. All right, and we've used this before. If you don't remember what substring does, like I said, I've gone over this a few times in other videos. All right, so it's a prototype. There's substring as str, which does one thing, which talks about the length that you want to cut off. And then there is the substring, which has a start index and an end index that you want. All right, and that's what's going to pass back. So an index start and an optional index end that you're going to return back as a string, which is what we want. So instead of 3/8, all right, it's going to return me back. Should return me back. So var equals var num box.val value. So instead of 2/8, actually give me 1/8, then no 8s. So, or if I have 1, 2, 3, and you clear 1, 2, and it goes backwards. There you go. All right, and there you have it. There is a finished calculator. All done, ready to go. -7 plus 8 equals, and all you're doing is using some built-in JavaScript, vanilla JavaScript functions. All right, and remember, I did change some things. I added in some. I think I might have changed some names going from one video to the next. Sorry, I noticed that after I started that I switched around names again. I've been going back and forth between notes and a few projects that I have opened and closed as I've been testing this out. So I think I might have opened up a different one and shown you guys that. So again, make sure that your functions match names in HTML. Make sure once you enable your certain dependencies here for your Bootstrap jQuery, and I even added in, what else did I add in? I think I added in, I did, Font Awesome. Why did I add in Font Awesome? Because instead of this CE, you can add in an arrow in here if you wanted to use pure Bootstrap buttons, okay? Remember, those go in as inline elements because the anchor tags you're using for the Bootstrap buttons or BTN classes. What goes in here goes in between those anchor tags. Remember, that's what populates this. So then you can add an inline element to populate this with the Bootstrap back, or the not the Bootstrap back arrow, but the Font Awesome back arrow. And then you can actually use stylized numbers for all of these as well and give yourself Bootstrap buttons. Although I don't think it comes out as nice as this. It doesn't really look as, doesn't feel like you can actually almost hear the click on these buttons. So I just didn't like the way that looked. Okay, which is the only reason I didn't do that. But you can experiment with it and get something that you like that looks really cool. And that's going to be all. Technically, this project is over and done. You've done it. Congratulations. Although I suggest you take the next step and preview the next thing, which is going to be going up to GitHub and saving your project forever. Push, pull, spinning up virtual machines. It's all fun stuff. Checking out a new IDE. So make sure you come back and join me next time so that way we can finish up this project properly. And again, as always, hopefully this was helpful, and I will see you next time.